Hollywood's glittering surface concealed some of entertainment's darkest secrets. These weren't mere scandals whispered by publicists behind closed doors. These were actual murders, real killings, real victims. Some committed by the absolute biggest names in cinema. Some covered up so thoroughly that the truth only emerged decades later. What happens when fame completely distorts a person's judgment? When celebrity provides insulation from consequences? When a star's name carries more weight than justice itself? This is the untold story of Golden Age icons whose relationships ended in tragedy and blood. Stories the industry worked desperately to bury. Stories revealing how Hollywood's most powerful received protection no ordinary person could access. Between the 1930s and 1960s, during Hollywood's most glamorous era, these 10 cases expose uncomfortable truths about privilege, power, and accountability. 1. Spade Cooley Donnell. Clyde Cooley, known to millions as Spade Cooley, reigned as the self-proclaimed king of Western swing throughout the Golden Age. His career achievements were absolutely stunning by any entertainment standard. 38 Western films featured him in supporting roles. His groundbreaking television show, debuting in 1948, drew millions of viewers coast to coast through the Paramount Television Network during primetime slots. The program won prestigious Emmy Awards in 1952 and 1953 for quality entertainment. His orchestra sold out the largest and most prestigious venues across America. His signature tune, "Shame on You," remained at #1 on country music charts for 2 consecutive months, dominating the airwaves. Young people packed ballrooms and dance halls throughout California and surrounding states, dancing enthusiastically to his arrangements. He accumulated substantial wealth through entertainment earnings, real estate ventures, and various business interests, including the ill-fated Water Wonderland project. Success, fame, money, and cultural influence surrounded him completely. By April 1961, all of it would end in absolutely unbearable violence and tragedy. Cooley's second wife was Ella Mae Evans, described as a beautiful blonde singer from his band. They married in 1945 when he was already well established as an entertainment powerhouse, earning top dollar. She was only 21 years old at the time of their wedding. She was 15 years his junior, vulnerable and inexperienced in increasingly dangerous ways. Their marriage from the very beginning featured fierce, consuming jealousy that dominated his behavior completely. Cooley accused her constantly and obsessively of infidelity. He threatened repeatedly and explicitly to find her and kill her if she ever left him. Years of brutal beatings followed their marriage. Nurses and household staff regularly witnessed terrible violent assaults. One nurse was forced to strike him with a heavy eucalyptus log to stop one particularly vicious incident. By February 1961, Ella Mae was hospitalized for a nervous breakdown due to stress. She told doctors she was kept as a prisoner in her own home. She spoke openly of escalating abuse and repeated death threats against herself and their 3 children. She lived in constant fear for her life and theirs. On March 23, 1961, after months of deliberation, Ella Mae finally filed for divorce, hoping to escape. Cooley snapped completely upon learning this news. His grip on reality dissolved entirely. He hired a private investigator to follow her movements. He forced her to confess affairs in explicit and humiliating detail. He made her sign a written confession, admitting to specific encounters with other men. On April 3, 1961, Cooley attacked his wife at their isolated ranch home near Willow Springs in the Mojave Desert, far from any neighbors who might help. What followed was among the most brutal domestic murders ever documented in court records. He beat her head repeatedly against the hard floor. He stomped on her abdomen with his full weight, breaking her ribs. He yanked hair from her scalp in large clumps. He choked her with his bare hands. Throughout this savage assault lasting hours, his 14-year-old daughter Melody watched in absolute terror. She testified later with heartbreaking detail about what she witnessed. She testified that her father called his wife a derogatory slur. He said he wanted Melody to witness everything. He said she would see her mother pay for her betrayals. Then Cooley knelt beside his wife's battered body. He said he needed to check if she was actually dead. He took a burning cigarette and crushed it against her skin repeatedly in different places. He burned both her nipples to test if she was still alive and could feel pain. Ella May was 37 years old. She had 3 dependent children who loved her. She had tried desperately to escape the violence. She had gone to the hospital seeking help. She had filed for divorce, and it still wasn't enough to save her life. The grand jury indicted Cooley on April 26, 1961, on charges of first-degree murder. The trial became the longest and most sensational case in Kern County history. Cooley claimed his wife had simply slipped in the shower and fallen fatally. That story collapsed immediately under prosecution scrutiny. A jury found him guilty of first-degree murder on August 21, 1961. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with possibility of parole. He spent 8 years in prison as a model inmate. Ronald Reagan approved his parole. Cooley walked free in 1969, but on November 23, 1969, granted a 72-hour furlough to perform at a benefit concert in Oakland. Cooley suffered a massive heart attack. He died at 58. He had served less than 9 years for murdering his wife. Spade Cooley remains the only convicted murderer with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That star was awarded in March 1960, 14 months before the murder happened. It still sits there. Today, on Hollywood Boulevard. 2. William S. Burroughs. William Seward Burroughs became a towering intellectual figure of the Beat Generation movement in American literature. His controversial novel, Naked Lunch, published in 1962, influenced entire generations of artists, writers, musicians, and filmmakers throughout the world. The book was shocking, experimental, and transgressive in ways that pushed artistic boundaries. He appeared in avant-garde films throughout his creative life. His gaunt, angular face and deliberate deadpan delivery made him an instantly recognizable cultural icon in artistic circles everywhere. Museums displayed his paintings and mixed-media works prominently. Universities taught his books in advanced literature classes. Literary critics and intellectuals treated him as a genuine creative genius, deserving serious study. Academic papers were written analyzing his innovative writing techniques. He was celebrated widely, respected intellectually, and culturally influential in major ways. He was also a man who shot his wife in the head and largely escaped legal accountability for that heinous crime. On September 6, 1951, Burroughs and his wife Joan Vollmer attended a party in Mexico City. They had been drinking heavily throughout the evening. Burroughs became increasingly intoxicated and increasingly reckless in his behavior. He announced to assembled guests that he would perform the legendary William Tell act from American folklore. He would attempt to shoot an object off the top of someone's head. His wife volunteered for the dangerous trick. She placed a gin glass on top of her skull carefully. Burroughs raised a pistol. He fired from just a few feet away. The bullet didn't hit the glass at all. It struck her directly in the forehead, creating a fatal wound. Joan Vollmer died instantly from the gunshot. She was 27 years old, vibrant and intelligent, and full of artistic potential. She was a writer and intellectual in her own right, not just the wife of a famous man. She had contributed significantly to the early beat movement's development. She was brilliant and promising in her own career. She was loved by friends and family members. Now she was dead because of her husband's reckless, drunken behavior. Burroughs was arrested and spent just 13 days in jail total. His wealthy, well-connected family mobilized immediately to help him escape. They sent a skilled Mexican attorney with significant government connections to represent him. That lawyer secured bail equivalent to about $2,000 in modern currency. Burroughs was released from custody and fled Mexico immediately thereafter. He never appeared for trial. He was eventually convicted in absentia of homicide in a court where he wasn't present. But he was safely beyond Mexican jurisdiction at that point. No extradition occurred. No serious punishment followed. He simply left the country. What makes this case even more disturbing is how Burroughs transformed the tragedy into part of his personal mythology and creative origin story. Rather than expressing genuine remorse, he occasionally referred to the shooting as merely an accident. But he also made chilling statements about the incident in interviews. He claimed that Joan's violent death had awakened something profound within him spiritually. He said it activated an ugly spirit inside him that set him on the path to serious writing. He incorporated his wife's violent death into his creative origin story. He made her murder a crucial chapter in the narrative of his artistic development. He benefited from her death. While Burroughs went on to write celebrated novels, to give readings and performances, to collaborate with famous musicians and artists, to achieve worldwide recognition as a countercultural hero and literary genius, Joan remained frozen in time. Her potential never realized. Her voice permanently silenced by the husband who killed her. She was reduced to a footnote in literary history, a romantic tragedy that supposedly inspired his genius. The man who killed her became celebrated in academic institutions, while she faded completely into obscurity and historical irrelevance. 3. Gig Young Byron Ellsworth. Barry, stage-named Gig Young, built a steady career through the 1940s and 1950s. Films like Teacher's Pet and Come Fill the Cup showcased his talents. Then, in 1969, Young won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He appeared in They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, demonstrating his capacity to portray genuinely menacing characters. The Oscar seemed like the beginning of a major career resurgence. Instead, it marked the beginning of his downfall. Alcoholism had already ravaged his health and professional relationships. In 1974, director Gene Wilder replaced him in a major film because Young's withdrawal symptoms made him unreliable on set. His fourth wife stated that the Oscar was literally the kiss of death, the moment everything began falling apart. Young spiraled further into despair and heavy drinking. On September 27, 1978, Young married Kim Schmidt. She was a 31-year-old German magazine editor. Young had known her for exactly 3 weeks before the ceremony. This represented his fifth marriage. The timing seemed ominous to people who knew him. 3 weeks after the wedding, on October 19, 1978, Young and his new bride were in their Manhattan apartment. At approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, Young retrieved a .38 caliber revolver. He shot Kim Schmidt in the back of her head. Then he turned the gun on himself. A building employee heard the gunshots, but the bodies weren't discovered until 5 hours later. Police found Young's body face down on the bedroom floor. His Oscar statue sat nearby on a shelf. An open diary lay on the nightstand. The page for September 27th read simply, "We got married today." But there was no suicide note. No message. No explanation for why he had murdered his new wife before. Taking his own life. Investigators concluded it was a murder-suicide. Young had acted on impulse, destroying both their lives in seconds. His estate totaled approximately $200,000. His career had essentially ended years earlier. His marriages had been disasters. His final act was an inexplicable, violent tragedy. Young was 64 years old, an Oscar winner with 5 failed marriages. The last one lasted only 3 weeks. It ended in murder and death. 4. John Huston. John Marcellus. Huston was one of cinema's greatest directors. He created masterpieces like The Maltese Falcon in 1941, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre in 1948, and The African Queen in 1951. He was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. He directed the greatest actors of his era. His films are studied in universities worldwide. His legacy is monumental and celebrated. But long before achieving that glory, Huston killed a pedestrian while driving drunk. On September 25, 1933, Huston was driving on Sunset Boulevard when his vehicle struck and killed a Brazilian dancer named Tosca Ruffian. She was married to the Latin film star Raul Ruffian. Her death created an international incident given her prominent entertainment connections. Earlier that same year, Huston had crashed into a parked car while driving under the influence. The impact threw actress Zeta Johann through the windshield, causing severe head trauma. She survived but suffered lasting injuries. Despite these 2 separate incidents demonstrating a dangerous pattern, an inquest absolved Huston of blame in the fatal accident. His father, the prominent actor Walter Huston, used considerable influence and wealth to ensure no trial occurred. No charges were filed. Nothing. The incident was simply erased from official record. Media attention forced Huston to flee to Europe temporarily. He reportedly lived as a vagrant for a period. But by 1937, he was back in Hollywood working as a screenwriter. Within a few years, he was directing some of the most acclaimed films in cinema history. A Dead Woman, A Devastating Family, and a career that not only recovered but flourished magnificently. That is how it ended for John Huston. He never faced legal consequences. He never served a single day in jail. He directed for another 50 years, becoming one of the most celebrated filmmakers ever. 5. The Jealous Bandleader's Daughter. Melody's Testimony. Cooley's case stands apart because his daughter was forced to witness the murder firsthand. Melody Cooley was 14 years old when her father called her into the bedroom. She saw her mother's battered body. She heard her father's cruel words. She watched as he tortured her mother's corpse to confirm death. This psychological trauma defined Melody's entire existence thereafter. After the murder, she testified against her own father at trial. The jury heard every detail she provided. The prosecution built much of its case on her eyewitness account. She was forced to relive the horror publicly. The emotional cost was devastating and permanent. She developed serious psychological problems. She made multiple attempts on her own life. She struggled with substance abuse issues. She spent time in psychiatric facilities and reform schools. She had difficulty forming stable relationships with others. Eventually, Melody found some stability. She became a real estate broker. She wrote an autobiography titled Detour in 1988, where she recounted the murder and its aftermath in explicit detail. She detailed the lasting trauma of being forced to watch her father kill her mother. But she could never escape the trauma of witnessing that violence. The studio system worked to protect Cooley's reputation initially. They minimized the scandal. They tried to frame it as a tragedy rather than an unforgivable crime. But the truth eventually emerged because Melody's testimony made sure of it. Her courage in testifying against her own father ensured that justice, however incomplete, was pursued, and that the full horror of the crime was documented. 6. Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was best known for his comedy work. He appeared on Saturday Night Live, where he demonstrated brilliant comedic timing. He voiced characters on the animated series The Simpsons. His work on the television show News Radio showcased his dramatic range. He was a talented performer with significant earning power. He was married to Bryn Omdahl, a woman struggling with serious personal demons. Cocaine use had become a central problem in her life. She had completed 2 separate stints in rehab facilities. She was taking antidepressant medications for severe depression. Depression and substance abuse combined to create an extremely volatile situation. On May 28, 1998, Hartman and his wife argued about her drug use. He reportedly threatened to file for divorce. The confrontation escalated dramatically. Bryn retrieved Phil's Smith & Wesson .38 caliber handgun. She fired 3 shots at point-blank range while he slept in their bed. 2 shots struck his head. 1 struck his body. Phil Hartman died from his injuries. Shortly after admitting what she had done to a friend, Bryn climbed back into the bed where her dead husband's body still lay. She placed the gun in her mouth and fired. She died from a self-inflicted wound. Their children were in the house during the entire incident. They witnessed their parents' violent deaths. Phil Hartman was one of the most beloved comedians of his era. He was only 49 years old. His career had reached new heights. His future seemed bright. Then it ended in gunshots and blood. 7. Charles Chaplin Jr.'s secret. Charles Chaplin Jr. was the son of Charlie Chaplin, one of cinema's greatest figures. The elder Chaplin was a legendary silent film star and director. He created the tramp character. He made City Lights and Modern Times. He directed masterpieces that changed cinema forever. Charles Jr. grew up in the enormous shadow of his father's genius. He never achieved comparable success as an actor. He appeared in various films and television programs, but he remained forever overshadowed by his father's towering reputation. In the 1960s, Chaplin Jr. was involved in a fatal drunk driving accident. He was driving under the influence when his vehicle struck another car. At least 1 person died in the collision. The exact details remain difficult to verify through public records. The victims' names have been effectively erased from public record completely. The date and location are inconsistently reported in the few sources that mention the incident at all. This obscurity is itself revealing about Hollywood's power. Chaplin Jr. benefited from his father's enormous influence. Studio lawyers minimized charges against him. The famous family name created protections unavailable to ordinary defendants. Chaplin Jr. faced reduced legal consequences compared to what a typical person would have received for identical crimes. He wasn't imprisoned. He didn't face serious criminal prosecution. The incident was buried effectively. It faded from public memory. Chaplin Jr.'s troubled life extended beyond this incident. He struggled with alcohol throughout his life. He had difficulty establishing a successful independent identity separate from his famous father's shadow. He died relatively young in 1968 at age 42. His life was defined largely by the contrast between his famous name and his failure to achieve comparable individual significance. 8. Cheryl Crane's Lana Turner was one of Golden Age Hollywood's biggest stars. She appeared in the classic films The Postman Always Rings Twice and Imitation of Life. She was beautiful and talented and massively successful. But her personal life was chaotic and dangerous. She was married multiple times. She had relationships with powerful and violent men. In 1958, Turner was in a relationship with Johnny Stompanato, a 32-year-old mobster. Stompanato was connected to crime boss Mickey Cohen. He was violent and abusive toward Turner. He threatened to kill Turner and her daughter. He promised to slash Turner's face with a razor. He was absolutely serious about these threats. 14-year-old Cheryl Crane, Turner's daughter, overheard the violent confrontation. She heard the death threats, directed at her mother. She was terrified for her mother's life. Crane retrieved an 8-inch kitchen knife from the kitchen. She ran toward her mother's bedroom. When Stompanato lunged at Turner, Cheryl stabbed him once in the abdomen. The wound proved fatal. Stompanato bled to death before medical assistance could arrive. The killing was ruled justifiable homicide. Authorities determined that Crane had acted to protect her mother from imminent harm. No criminal charges were filed against her. The legal outcome was technically correct. A child had protected her parent from a dangerous attacker. But the psychological consequences were severe and lasting. Crane experienced lasting trauma from killing another human being. She struggled with emotional problems for years. She had difficulty forming healthy relationships with others. She made attempts on her own life. She spent time in psychiatric facilities and reform schools. Eventually, Crane found stability in adulthood. She became a real estate broker. She wrote an autobiography in 1988 called Detour, where she provided her own detailed account of the incident. 9. Errol Flynn's Errol Flynn was one of the most charismatic actors who ever lived on screen or off. He starred in swashbuckling adventures like The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood. He was devastatingly handsome. He was confident and daring both on screen and in his personal life. He was involved in 2 separate statutory rape allegations in 1942. The trial occurred in 1943. He was acquitted, but the scandal damaged his image permanently. Off-screen, Flynn's life was marked by constant violence and chaos. He got into fights regularly. He drank heavily and constantly. He womanized relentlessly and without restraint. His personal relationships were disasters without exception. He married 3 times and fathered several children. His parenting was absent at best and negligent at worst. His son, Sean Flynn, became a war correspondent and disappeared in Cambodia in April 1970. Sean was presumed killed by the Khmer Rouge. His daughter, Arnella, struggled with addiction and died relatively young. But Flynn himself never directly killed any of his family members with his own hands. His violence was directed outward toward others. His womanizing, his drinking, his recklessness created the conditions for tragedy around him. But unlike the others on this list, Flynn's most direct victims were outside his family circle. 10. Wallace Reid. William Wallace Halleck. Reid was celebrated as silent cinema's screen's most perfect lover. Born in St. Louis in 1891, Reid became one of Hollywood's major heartthrobs. He appeared in D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation and worked with directors Alan Dwan and Cecil B. DeMille. Famous Players Lasky Corporation signed him to star in over 60 films. He married actress Dorothy Davenport in 1913 and had 2 children. Beneath the glamorous surface lurked a tragedy that would destroy him. In 1919, while filming The Valley of the Giants in Oregon, Reid suffered a terrible train crash causing severe injuries. The studio refused to halt production. Famous Players Lasky sent their company doctor with morphine. They wanted Reid working despite excruciating pain. The studio prioritized profit over health. After filming finished, Reid was immediately assigned another production. The studio kept supplying morphine continuously. He had no opportunity to recover or stop using the drug. His addiction deepened with each film. Studio executives realized they could control him through dependency. By October 1922, Reid collapsed on set. Executives minimized the scandal, describing it as nervous breakdown rather than addiction. Reid was admitted to Banksia Sanitarium in December 1922. He received brutal detoxification treatments in padded rooms. On January 18, 1923, Wallace Reid died at 31 from influenza and pneumonia. He was the first major Hollywood star to die from drug addiction. His widow Dorothy created human wreckage in 1923, exposing the system that destroyed him. Wallace Reid's death represented institutional murder dressed as tragedy. Do you believe these cases represent isolated tragedies or systemic failures in how Hollywood handled its biggest stars? Should powerful names and famous families receive the same justice as ordinary people? Comment below with your thoughts. The entertainment industry has always protected its own. The question is whether that protection serves justice or destroys it. Should we hold celebrities to higher standards given their platform and influence, or should they receive equal treatment under law?